Right, we're now ready to start questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. And I call Ms Anya Murphy. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As members will be aware, as a result of confirmed cases of blue tongue virus stereotype 3 in England, the trade of all live ruminants from Great Britain to Northern Ireland has been restricted. This area, in terms of the question, does fall under the direction and control of the Secretary of State, as provided for in Regulation 3 of the Windsor Framework Implementation Regulations 2024. There is 19 areas which fall under the direction and control of the Secretary of State. I intend to lodge more details in relation to those into the Assembly Library and also to publish that onto the Assembly website.
Murphy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer, and I know that this is a deeply frustrating and indeed expensive time for farmers who have been hit by these restrictions. Minister, are you aware of any possible solutions that are currently being developed by DEFRA in relation to allow for the resumption of livestock imports from GB to the north?
Minister. Thank the member for her question. I'm not aware of anything further that DEFRA is considering in relation to this. What I do hear from many people in the industry is a real concern to ensure that blue tongue does not come into Northern Ireland, and that's the first focus for people in Northern Ireland from the farming background.
Tom Elliott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the Minister for that. Asking the Minister if the blue tongue issue was resolved, what was to stop livestock movements from GB to Northern Ireland then by just using the 15-day standstill rule at an export centre?
Minister.
Thank the member for his questions. I would again outline to members this area falls under the direction and control of the Secretary of State under the Windsor Framework Implementations 2024, and the Secretary of State for DEFRA is the key person in relation to this. What would require is that for the Secretary of State for DEFRA to apply for regionalisation.
Mr Alistair.
What representations has the Minister for Agriculture in Northern Ireland made to DEFRA about this matter? And indeed, has the Secretary of State issued any directions under the implementation regulations relevant to this? And isn't it abundantly absurd that you can bring cattle from France through Great Britain to Northern Ireland unimpeded, but you can't bring cattle from GB to Northern Ireland?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. There's three parts to his question. The key issue in terms of your question was whether the Secretary of State has issued a direction to civil servants. I'm not aware that any direction has been given, but for further information I would advise the member to follow that up with the Secretary of State for DEFRA. In terms of the issues around this, the key issue is in terms of the costs arising from this and whether compensation is forthcoming, and I'm not aware whether DEFRA have been considering that. I know it's an issue of concern, and it's a concern for me.
I call Sinead Ennis.
Who?
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. I recognise that 2023 was a challenging year for potato growers, and our very wet and late spring of 2024 is now negatively impacting farming operations across almost every sector within the industry. I am conscious of the wider impact if wet weather continues in the weeks ahead, and have therefore made representations to the UK Government about the need for central government intervention if the situation does not improve. In the meantime, I encourage all farmers seeking advice on management of their farming operations during this ongoing poor weather to contact the College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise through their local CAFRE advisor. In terms of a financial support scheme for potato growers affected by flooding in the counties of Armagh and Down last year, this has been rigorously examined by DERA. A business case was developed to test the need for and value for money, including the net additional NI economy impact of a potential support package. However, the conclusion of this process was that government intervention was not likely to meet the threshold associated with managing public money required to justify and authorise this expenditure. For this reason, DERA has not implemented a support scheme. I had previously advised members of my intention to review the impact of this flooding event. As part of my review, I instructed officials to undertake inspections of fields that were identified as being subject to flooding. This work has been completed but did not support a change in the conclusion.
Dennis.
Again, I appreciate the Minister's answer, but certainly the farming community feel very much left behind in terms of help and support following the recent flooding event. And I appreciate the dire financial situation that departments are facing after years of Tory underfunding. But can I ask the Minister, will he commit to continue to raise this with the British Government to ensure that if additional money is found, that farmers can avail of that financial support that is much needed following the recent severe flooding events?
Minister.
I can, and I raised it with Minister Steve Baker last Wednesday whilst in London, outlined the critical nature of this. Whilst we had a few good days of weather, the forecast for the days ahead isn't great, and I'm aware that this is a real issue of concern, and I'm aware that the Irish Government have brought forward a scheme of support, but what we need here is the UK Government intervention, because this is something that is of an enormity that requires the UK Government to step up.
Michelle McElvain.
I'd like to thank the Minister and in particular his officials who I have engaged with since the autumn floods in respect of potato farmers, but I really can't adequately express the disappointment felt by those farmers who quite frankly believe that the Minister wasn't brave enough to intervene and give them the vital financial support that they needed following the extensive loss of crop compared to while other businesses were able to avail of support. Can I ask the Minister how this decision sits with his desire to champion the horticultural sector, many of whom may go out of business as a result of his inaction?
Minister.
Thank the member for her question and for her engagement with our officials in relation to this particular issue in terms of potato growers. What I have got to do as Minister is to satisfy myself in terms of the use of public funds and the tests associated with that. I'm also conscious of the budget situation, and my department sits here and look forward to support from other members in this chamber to improve that situation. I'm very keen to support the horticulture sector, but what I need is a need to be able to satisfy myself in terms of use of public funds and also in terms of budget cover in relation to this. I'm aware that previously ministerial directions have been issued around this, but I'm also conscious as previously a member of the Public Accounts Committee of the threshold that needs to be reached in relation to that. And I think it's important that we lobby the UK Government for a UK-wide support scheme.
Paula Broadshill.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer so far in this question. Can you please outline your department's plans under the new Farm Support and Development Programme around supporting farmers impacted by crisis? Thank you.
Thank the member for a question. The key objective of my department's approach through the new Farm Support and Development Programme is to encourage farm businesses to better manage risk within their own businesses and to become more resilient, to be better prepared to cope for situations such as bad weather. A crisis framework is being developed under the programme that will enable my department to assess potential industry impacts such as weather or market failure. It will determine the most appropriate timing and form of intervention necessary for a specific crisis. This will involve setting out trigger points, such as scale of impact or market price reductions, to inform the operation of this framework. I look forward to receiving a briefing on the work to date from officials. In terms of preparedness for exceptional weather events, my officials continue to engage and collaborate with government and agency partners through such fora as the Northern Ireland Flood Strategy Steering Group and the Regional Community Resilience Group to ensure that our collective response to and recovery from adverse weather is efficient, effective and targeted.
Minister, could I ask you just, we all know fodder's running low, the cattle can't be put out and animals can't be put out in the fields, crops can't be planted. Have you ever considered a sort of mechanism whereby certain conditions, if they're met by the department analysing the situation, that an automatic kick-in of provision of support would be provided for the farming and horticultural sectors?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question, and I think it's quite a constructive question. I think it's something we need to consider in terms of the future Farm Support and Development Programme. Look, the reality here is that climate change is something that's affecting all of Northern Ireland, and it's here to stay, unfortunately. And what we need to do is we need to be able to build resilience within our agriculture sector, and initiatives such as what you outline are something that can be considered in the future. And what's key to this is in terms of its budget.
Question 3.
Mr Speaker, with permission, I would like to answer questions 3, 6, 8 and 9 together. Trees are very popular here today, and it's good to see that. To achieve its target of planting 18 million trees by 2030, my department has done a number of things. It's revised its forest expansion grant scheme by lowering the minimum area threshold for eligibility to the scheme. In addition, it introduced a new small woodland grant scheme in December 2020, aimed particularly at attractive native woodland projects for a wide range of applicants, including smaller landowners. It also supports both the Forest Expansion Grant Scheme and the Small Woodland Grant Scheme at a level of around £3 million annually in grant payments. The Department also continues to work in collaboration with a number of councils and public bodies such as Northern Ireland Water to encourage the afforestation of available publicly owned land. And also the Department has commenced a programme of stakeholder engagement with forest industry and landowner representatives to jointly consider measures that can be taken to further increase afforestation. The Department is considering a number of policy options aimed at increasing the level of afforestation. These include new grant support mechanisms to incentivise landowners to plant woodland for carbon capture, sustainable timber production, contributing to jobs and our economy, water quality protection, environmental and habitat enhancement, and public access for health and well-being. The Department's Farm Support and Development Programme includes a Farming with Nature package, which is currently under development. It is anticipated this package will offer support to farmers to plant small areas of trees and to plant trees in existing and new hedgerows. The Department's plans to increase the rate of afforestation are being prepared and will be included in Northern Ireland's Climate Action Plan.
Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer so far. And recently I attended Border Gold, a farm in Limavady in my constituency, which is working with nature and protecting biodiversity, so we know our farmers play a key role there. Minister, my question just is in regards to incentives for farmers to protect biodiversity and to plant more trees. You touched on a number of key things there, but in addition to those, is there anything else you're exploring or anything else your department is looking at to incentivise our farmers?
Minister. I thank the member for her question, and there's many good examples in Northern Ireland. I think it's fantastic to see that. I think the future farm support programme is going to be a key element of this, and what I want to do is work with farmers to see what we can do in relation to this area, because there's some farmers where this will be difficult, but for some farmers this will be something that's attractive. We also need to be dealing with a generational issue in terms of farmers who want to hand on their land to younger people within their family, and how we can facilitate this. So this is absolutely key around this, because the farming community is the custodians of our countryside, and we need to work with them to achieve our targets in relation to this.
Source Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his questions so far as well. I really welcome the work the Minister has done in terms of tackling the issue of afforestation. In Lagan Valley and Lisburn Castlereagh, we have one of the least wooded areas in the north. Can the Minister outline what additional steps the planting of trees contributes to nature recovery?
Thank the member for her question. I'm very conscious that in terms of Northern Ireland we have one of the least forwarded regions in the whole of Europe, but there's real opportunities to address that. Northern Ireland woodland cover is low compared to other UK countries, and also this includes many small native woodlands that are remnants of much more extensive tree cover that's in the past. Whilst all woodlands are important for biodiversity, and protecting them is integral to efforts to mitigate climate change and promote nature recovery, tree planting to increase the size of existing woodlands and their connectivity through the landscape will contribute to their resilience and provide new habitat to support wildlife.
Alex Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister so far for his answers? Could the Minister outline what areas of North Down might be included in this tree plantation, and also could he outline the benefits to schools who might want to partake in helping to plant trees?
Thank the member for his question. I think the participation of schools is a fantastic opportunity, and it's something I'm very keen to work with the Minister of Education around this issue. In terms of North Down, there's many areas of opportunity. I think it was only just 2 weeks ago, it was in Hunts Park in Dognadee, where a community orchard has been planted. That's the community actively stepping forward and wanting to see tree planting. So there's many opportunities here, and what we need to do is incentivise and encourage people to undertake this tree planting.
Paul Fruit.
Native tree planting assists in the enhancement of wildlife compared to the forests of evergreen for timber production, which basically kills everything underneath. Has the Minister got the balance right?
In terms of environmental policy in Northern Ireland, getting the balance right is absolutely key, and something I'm very conscious of. I'm also conscious of my obligations under the climate change legislation in terms of afforestation. So what we need is to balance that and work with people in relation to this, and I'll not be found wanting in terms of wanting to strike a correct balance in these issues, but also be clear what our targets are.
Yes,
the Minister would detail how his department came to the figure of 18 million trees.
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. I will write back in more detail in relation to where the evidence came from in relation to that, but I'm conscious that in terms of the climate change legislation, there is clear targets around this, and tree cover is something that's absolutely fundamental to that.
I call Dr. Steve Aiken.
Question number 4, please.
Thank the member for his question. My response is quite long and quite detailed. The intent of the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, is to assign a fair price to the carbon emitted during the production of carbon-intensive goods that are entering the EU, and to encourage cleaner industrial production in non-EU countries. My officials are working closely with counterparts in the UK Government to develop an understanding of how the mechanism may affect relevant stakeholders in Northern Ireland, and this is an ongoing process. As you may be aware, the EU CBAM will come into full operation on the 1st of January 2026, having been implemented on a transitional basis from the 1st of October 2023. On the 18th of December last year, the UK Government announced the intention to implement a UK CBAM with effect from the 1st of January 2027 as part of their response to the 2023 consultation on potential carbon leakage mitigation measures. Feedback to this initial consultation highlighted the importance of alignment to a UK-designed scheme with similar mechanisms in other jurisdictions, such as how it will integrate with the EU mechanism. The UK Government has launched a further consultation seeking views on the potential design of this mechanism, and this remains open until the 13th of June. As set out in the UK Government command paper entitled Safeguarding the Union, the EU CBAM cannot apply in Northern Ireland unless this is agreed by the UK. It can only apply in Northern Ireland with the agreement of the UK and in line with the democratic safeguards of the Windsor Framework. Consequently, as things stand, the EU CBAM should not impact on trade between Northern Ireland and GB. The UK Emissions Trading Scheme, of which Northern Ireland is an active and equal partner with the UK Government and other devolved administrations, is a really effective carbon reduction mechanism, helping us collectively to deliver reducing greenhouse gases and to meet our global commitments. Assigning a price to carbon emissions is a proven way to incentivise innovation and emissions reduction, and positive action taken by many industries and businesses in Northern Ireland will contribute to reduce their exposure to any external CBAM. A summary of the European Commission guidance on EU CBAM for UK exporters has been produced by the UK Government and is available on gov.uk.
Dr. Aiken.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank the Minister for his very fulsome reply. Obviously, the significant issue is going to be on our linkage with the UK Emissions Trading Scheme. Has his officials had much contact yet with the UK Government on these significant issues? And have you had any indications so far of what the likely carbon pricing infrastructure is likely to be? And more importantly, Minister, what the likely differential between the EU and the UK is likely to be?
Minister.
So there are 3 very detailed questions about a very technical area, and I will write to ensure that you get a fulsome reply on this. I'm aware of the concerns around this. What I would say as Minister is that alignment between the UK and the EU in relation to these issues would resolve a lot of issues, and it's something I would encourage. I know that businesses would encourage that because there's environmental benefits associated with this, but there is uncertainty around these areas, and it's important that we remove uncertainty so businesses have the confidence to invest.
Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on the subject of the benefits of the emissions trading schemes, can the Minister outline to the House some of the environmental benefits that he's referenced?
Minister.
So what we need to do to meet our obligations under the climate change legislation, but also more broadly in terms of environmental policies, is we need to do everything we can to reduce emissions, and emissions trading schemes are absolutely key. The UK emissions trading scheme currently applies to energy-intensive industry, electricity generation and aviation. In Northern Ireland, there are currently 17 industrial installations in the scheme, as well as 2 aviation operators. There are also 6 electricity generators who continue to participate in the EU ETS under the terms of the Windsor Framework. This is to protect the operation of the all-Ireland single electricity market.
Steve McLaughlin.
for your answer so far. Minister, can you detail what steps that you will take with the Irish Government in relation to CBAM?
Sir.
I'm aware of there might be concerns in terms of the impact of trade with the Republic of Ireland. At present, the impact of EU CBAM on Northern Ireland companies exporting to the Republic of Ireland is not clear. My officials continue to work closely with UK Government counterparts to develop an understanding of potential impacts in Northern Ireland. UK Government colleagues have committed to ensuring my department is kept updated as understanding develops. However, I do not have any specific information on the potential impacts to share with members at this time. The UK Government has produced a summary of the European Commission guidance on EU CBAM for UK exporters. This is available on the UK Government website, and I will write to you because the URL here is extremely long.
It's a complex issue and the picture is developing, and I accept that. But will you confirm that Northern Ireland will be subject to the EU CBAM rules unless the UK Government denies that? Or if the UK Government aligns with the European Union CBAM. It seems to me that this is an example of the lack of democracy and accountability, that Northern Ireland and this House cannot have these adjustments made.
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. We lost democracy and accountability for 2 years in this place, and it's good to see that we're back and we can answer questions in relation to this issue. At this stage, it remains unclear how the EU CBAM will affect Northern Ireland stakeholders. The EU may approach the UK with a view to including CBAM within the scope of the Windsor Framework. However, to date, no such approach has been made.
Chambers.
Question 5.
Thank the member for his question. It's something we know closely as North Down representatives. I can confirm that there has been one prosecution taken by my department in relation to water pollution in the Cotton River over the last 10 years. That case related an incident from agricultural source, and the fine imposed by the court was £1,500. During this 10-year period, there were 3 incidents that met the criteria for formal enforcement actions due to the impact on the environment. One was resolved via cross-compliance penalty, of which I'm reviewing with the Department at the present time in terms of a general policy area. No further action was possible in the remaining 2 incidences involving Northern Ireland water infrastructure, as the pollution was due to blockages in the system caused by third parties. However, Northern Ireland Environment Agency costs were recovered in these cases.
Mr. Chambers.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for his reply. It's very, very disappointing to hear the small number of prosecutions and detections over a 10-year period, because it's widely recognised that this river makes a huge contribution to the ongoing failure of water quality in Ballyholme Bay. And I know that the Minister, in his role as a local MLA in the recent past, has lobbied for solutions.
Can we get to the question, Mr. Chambers?
So I'm just asking the Minister, what is his solutions and what action is he going to take to improve the water quality of Ballyholme Bay?
Minister. Thank the member for his question. I do agree this is disappointing, and I'm aware of the consequences of this pollution in terms of, well, it's Ballyholme Beach when people look to go swimming. I don't think it is acceptable to see pollution of our watercourses. What I as Minister want to do is take every action I can to stop pollution of our waterways, and also want to see a stronger approach to enforcement around these issues as well. And that will require funding from my department. I suppose there's 2 issues to say around this. In terms of the issues at Ballyholme, and something I've been engaging with officials on, my department is collaborating with Northern Ireland Water and AFBI on enhancing monitoring of Ballyholme bathing water and the Cotton River during this coming bathing season, to apply microbial source tracking during dry and heavy rainfall periods. This will enable us to better understand how the indicators fluctuate and the primary sources of these, whether they're from wastewater or from agriculture, and which will then allow us to further target measures to improve water quality at the Ballyholme bathing water. There's more information in relation to the instances that have occurred over the last 10 years, and I will write to you to set out the details around this, because I think it's important we know what's happened, but also we chart a course to address this. We need to do something around agricultural runoff. Quite a lot needs to be done there, but also we need to invest in our wastewater infrastructure.
Deborah Erskine.
Minister for his answers so far. One pollution incident within 10 years is pretty shocking. How effective does the Minister think that his department effectively engages with NIEA and Northern Ireland Water to solve this issue? Because there are overspills caused by NI water into our waterways. That's a damning indictment in relation to our waterways here in Northern Ireland. How effective does his department work with NIEA?
Minister.
So my department works strongly with the Environment Agency. It's an agency of my department, and I engage regularly with the Chief Executive of that. In terms of Northern Ireland Water, this is something that is a concern for me, and I intend to meet with the Infrastructure Minister over the time ahead. What we need to do is investment, so we can invest in our wastewater infrastructure, because the result of not investing is the pollution instances which we're outlining, and also then the constraint on housing and economic development in Northern Ireland. And we need to do something differently in relation to this, because if we don't, we're going to continue to outline to the House the impacts of not investing in Northern Ireland Water. In terms of the agricultural runoff, there's probably two types of approaches we need to take. We need to do the engagement and the awareness raising of the impacts in terms of agricultural practices and how that can result in pollution, but also we need to look at enforcement around that as well, and that's something that will be quite key in terms of the action plan I intend to take forward in relation to Lough Neagh.
Anna Egan.
Speaker, I thank the Minister for his answers so far. We are all eagerly awaiting the Finance Minister to bring forward a budget. Could you please explain to us, Minister, what impact a budget settlement could have on the enforcement capabilities for your department for instances like the Cotton River in North Down?
Minister.
So the budget settlement for my department could go one of two ways. It could go to a situation where we can actually protect our environment. We can do that engagement, we can do that enforcement, and we can have something to be proud of in Northern Ireland. Or it could go to a situation where the budget settlement is totally inadequate, and what we're doing is reducing the level of enforcement, reducing the level of engagement, and we have scenes that have been occurring over the last number of years just continuing into the future. And I hope that the Executive will back me in terms of the funding bid that I've been making, so that we can address the issue of water quality in Northern Ireland.
Minister, whether it's the Cotton River in his constituency, the crisis at Lough Neagh, sewage being pumped into the sea where near bathing water, it's clear the public in Northern Ireland want a step change in terms of environmental enforcement beyond some of the very low, in fact pathetic numbers of prosecutions were outlined earlier. Does he agree that in order to do that we need an independent environmental protection agency, and will he commit to delivering one, so far as he's able, by the end of this mandate?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question, and the end of his question was my answer. So as far as I am able, this was a commitment under New Decade, New Approach. Conscious of that commitment, upon coming into office, I tasked officials to undertake an environmental governance review to see where we're sitting at the present moment in time, because we have the Office of Environmental Protection, we have a different landscape in terms of post-EU exit. We also have the issue in terms of how an independent environmental protection agency is funded, because if it's not independently funded, then there's an issue arising, is that a constraint on its work. My party has a very strong commitment to an independent environmental protection agency, and working with officials in terms of this environmental governance review, because what we do need is we need to have independent oversight here in Northern Ireland, and it's something that I'm quite keen to look at over the time ahead with officials. This will naturally be subject to consultation, and look forward to support from other parties within this House, because that is key to secure that in terms of going forward.
Question, Nicola Rogan.
Question number 7, please.
Minister.
Thank the member for a question. I've had recent discussions with my executive colleagues on the content of a draft environment strategy for Northern Ireland, otherwise known as an environmental improvement plan, and I hope to secure executive agreement to the strategy that is both ambitious and deliverable very shortly. Once agreement has been obtained, and I hope that is very shortly, I will be making a statement to the Assembly, and the strategy will be published as Northern Ireland's first environmental improvement plan and laid in the Assembly.
Brogan.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. Can the Minister advise if there are legally binding measures in the plan to reach the 30 by 30 target that the previous DERA Minister had committed to, please?
Minister.
So I don't want to unveil the strategy until it's been agreed by the Executive, but the strategy is a pathway to achieving many different targets within it, including what you have outlined, and it's absolutely key that the Executive adopts this soon so we can set this out, because it's also an overarching strategy for how we deal with the issues associated with Lough Neagh, because the catchment area for Lough Neagh is way beyond the bed and soil of the lough, and that's what we need to do, is having a strategy and then an action plan. So I hope that we can outline this very soon.
Time for table questions is up. We move to topical questions, and I call Patsy McGlone.
Yeah, thank you. Could I ask the Minister for an update on the proposals for the appointment of a Just Transition Commission, please?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. The Just Transition Commission is a key element of the climate change legislation which was passed democratically by this House in 2022, and I'm very keen to see it in place. I would hope to have it in place by the end of this year. One key aspect around this is in terms of funding, and there's a Just Transition Fund that's meant to come alongside that, and essentially that is the different pots of funding collaborated together under one umbrella. And it's quite key for me that we have a Just Transition funding for Northern Ireland, because that allows us to work and deliver climate change with people, and it's very, very key that we address that, and it's something I've engaged with the UK Government, but also I've engaged with the Labour Party in terms of their future fiscal policy, because climate change is an opportunity for Northern Ireland if it's funded correctly.
Mr McGlone.
Thank you for that, Minister. Could I also ask just, Minister, in regard to the Just Transition Fund for Agriculture, what proposals in fact you have for that, and what ask you've made for it?
Thank the member for his question. That forms a key part in terms of the earmark funding we receive for agricultural support, alongside other measures which come together in relation to that. And I think something I've lobbied strong to the UK Government in terms of the future, in terms of funding for Northern Ireland, and also to the Labour Party in the event that they form the next government, because it's absolutely key that we're able to assist and enable our agricultural community in terms of moving forward, and that climate change is a really big challenge for Northern Ireland, particularly for the agricultural sector. But if we're able to give funding towards that, we can grasp opportunities and give sustainability for our communities in Northern Ireland.
All right, Harvey.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister may be aware of the concerns of many of my constituents in relation to coastal erosion in Kirkcaldy. What action does your department intend to take to minimise the impact of coastal erosion?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. It's something that I'm regularly receiving correspondence in relation to. It's something of which does have no formal departmental responsibility around, but it's something that's an increasing issue, especially for our coastal communities in Northern Ireland. I saw it the first time when Diane Forsyth took me down to Topical and was able to see the cliffs and some of the issues that are being affected there, but also in other areas around Northern Ireland. I intend to meet with the Minister for Infrastructure of the time ahead so we can scope way forward as an executive in relation to this issue, because I understand the concerns around this, but I also am aware the funding is needed to accompany actions around this.
Mr Harvey.
Thank you, Minister, for your reply. Would the Minister be willing to meet a delegation from the area to discuss this matter? Thank you.
Minister.
I would be delighted to, and if you follow it up with my private office, hopefully we can schedule that.
Has told me that there was no formal consultation with him by the Secretary of State in relation to the Windsor Framework implementation regulations. Was there any consultation, and if so, what was the nature of that consultation, considering that powers were being removed from him?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. There was no formal consultation. The public were aware that regulations of this matter were being considered in September of last year. I think it was around that time. Upon taking up office, I became aware that this was again being considered, and there was reference to an element around this in the Safeguarding the Union command paper. So I met with the Secretary of State and I met with the Minister of State, Steve Baker, in relation to this issue, and I outlined my concerns around these issues. To me, what has been brought forward in relation to this is extremely challenging operationally, and I've outlined those concerns on multiple occasions to the UK Government in terms of the impact it has. We saw that today in terms of question time, where I was receiving a question about an issue which is under the direction and control of the Secretary of State for DEFRA, where that is under his remit, but yet members are asking me questions around that. I seek to participate and answer questions and engage with members of this House in every matter that they can, but if something's under the direction and control of the Secretary of State, I'm slightly impeded in terms of that. So I have outlined my concerns on multiple occasions to the UK Government. I'm meeting with Steve Baker again tomorrow around these issues.
Mr Allister.
The implementation regulations give the Secretary of State power to issue instructions or directions. Have any such instructions or directions been issued? And if and when they are, how will the Assembly know that?
Minister, and could you speak forward so the speakers can catch what you're saying?
Sorry,
please?
apologies. I was trying to face Mr. Allister and be polite, but I will speak into the microphone. I'm not aware if a direction has been issued, and perhaps I'm not the person to ask. Probably it's the Secretary of State for DEFRA to ask that, because that direction would be issued to officials in my department who are then reporting to that Secretary of State. So that's something that the relationship is there. There is, within the guidance set out, there is a requirement for engagement with relevant ministers, and that's something I've been made it clear I wish to see those engagements occurring on a monthly basis, because these are operationally challenging in relation to this. The point you make in terms of whether a direction is issued and whether this House is communicated to is a point I will make to Steve Baker tomorrow, because I think it's important for democratic accountability around this, these regulations that have been made are unprecedented. They're a movement in terms of the devolved space. I am assured that they're done in terms of upholding our international obligations in terms of the Windsor Framework, but there's practical challenges around this, and I'm conscious of those.
Hannah Egan.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, could you please outline what steps you and your department are taking to protect pollinators such as honeybees?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My department is responsible for 3 actions in the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan. My department funds organisations such as BugLife and Butterfly Conservation who undertake actions to provide habitat for pollinators. My officials support and coordinate guidance publications to promote All-Ireland Pollinator Action Plans.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister. Would you agree with me that the decline that we have seen in pollinators such as honeybees is concerning?
Minister.
I entirely agree, and when we see a decline, then that points to a real concern around our environment, and it's something that we should be very, very conscious of, and that's why I would encourage initiatives that address these issues, and I think the work that's done across Northern Ireland around these matters is actually to be encouraged and something my department is keen to support.
Gloria Flynn.
Can I ask the Minister to provide an update on progress around the dilapidation bill, if any? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank the member for her question. I am very keen to progress this bill. It is ready to go, and I'm waiting for the Executive to agree its legislative programme.
Thank you. Thanks very much to the Minister for his response. I know that he obviously expressed interest in this previously when there was the incident at the George Best Hotel in Belfast. But in the context of a new bill being brought forward, does the Minister envisage any overlap with DFC regarding urban development and the use of maybe some other grants for vacant and derelict buildings and land?
Minister.
Thank her, member, for her question. And it's something I have been very keen on, something I've didn't participate in taking up this ministry, so now I've got the responsibility for delivering this legislation. And dereliction within our town and city centres has a real impact, because it doesn't help deliver regeneration. It delivers quite the opposite around that. And in terms of regeneration powers, they do sit with the Department of Communities, so there needs to be a crossover in terms of, if we deliver this legislation, how can then we grant aid some of the engagements around this. So it's really key that we bring this forward. I'm very conscious of the impact of not having the legislation. The legislation will be an enabler, not as entire solution, but an enabler to tackle dereliction, and then that crossover to the Department of Communities hopefully can provide a bit of hope for town and city centres that have been the victim of dereliction.
Paul Bradshaw.
Please outline your department's budgetary requirements for this financial year. Thank you.
Sir.
I thank the member for her question. I'm very conscious that the budget situation that Northern Ireland faces in terms of potential decisions will involve very difficult choices to be made by all ministers, and I'll not shy away from those decisions myself. I'm not someone who's known for that, and it's someone who's very keen to ensure that as an executive we are successful and we're able to set our budget. But it's important that that budget is a fair budget, and is a budget that allows the departments to be able to deliver upon their expectations and duties for the people of Northern Ireland. I welcome the fact the Executive at their first meeting set the priority in terms of tackling the issues associated with Lough Neagh, and it's been talked about by some other members in here in terms of the issues such as water quality. These are the public's priority. They want to see action in relation to that. My concern around the budget and what could be allocated to my department is that in terms of what my department would be able to do, I would be potentially doing less rather than more. That would mean that in terms of any actions associated with Lough Neagh, that they would be paused. And I don't think that is credible nor acceptable. We need to be able to invest in terms of actions associated with Lough Neagh, and that is something I'm quite keen as a point to make to executive colleagues, because if you're going to make Lough Neagh a priority, we need to fund it. The other aspect is over half of my department is funded through earmark fundings associated with agricultural support, and I need staff to deliver that. And without the funding from my department, we may struggle to be able to distribute those funding. Lastly, in terms of compensation levels for bovine TV, it's important that those are funded. Otherwise, the budget would force me into decisions I do not wish to take.
Ms Bradshaw.
Thank you, Minister, for your answers. And you touched upon it a bit there, and it's in relation to Lough Neagh. And could you please outline the impact that an inadequate funding package will have on your ability to tackle the issues associated with Lough Neagh? Thank you.
I thank the member for her question. So, in terms of Lough Neagh, I think we're all aware of what the issues are associated with this. We need funding so we can do the engagement and education in terms of the reasons that are causing this, particularly in terms of agricultural runoff. We also need to provide incentification, but also we need to put resources into enforcement. And if we don't fund any of that, then what do people expect is going to happen in relation to Lough Neagh? The situation is going to repeat itself. So we need to fund these interventions. We also need to fund our wastewater infrastructure. We can, on one hand, bemoan the consequences of pollution in Lough Neagh and then not fund the interventions that are required to deal with the source of it. So we need to get real in relation to the environment here in Northern Ireland. We have a problem here. We need to acknowledge it. We also need to fund it. And this is what absolutely fundamental for my department. I recognise there's difficult choices to be made across Northern Ireland in terms of budgets and departments. I fully get that. But if we're going to make something a priority, then what we need to do is we need to be able to fund it.
John Buchanan.
Thank you, Speaker. Minister, I understand you have received a request from the Ulster Farmers Union and the Veterinary Services for a meeting dedicated to discussions around the wildlife intervention relating to TB issue. Do you intend to meet with them, and what has the hold-up been in that they haven't had their meeting as yet?
I thank the member for his question. I've had hundreds of meeting requests and I'm trying to accommodate them. I think meeting with the Ulster Farmers Union and other bodies associated with the TB strategy and interventions that could be made around that is important. I'm quite keen to facilitate that. If the member wants to write with me, we can try to arrange that. I meet the Ulster Farmers Union on a regular basis and we discuss these issues. I'm very conscious that the whole issue around TB needs action in relation to that. That's why I've tasked the new Chief Veterinary Officer, Brian Dure, to take a fresh look at this. I'm conscious that time's not on our side because of the budget pressures around this, and it's something I'm quite keen to deal with.
Minister, or Mr Buchanan.
Mr Speaker, I understand this is a meeting, however, dedicated to the discussion around the TB issue. And given that 89,000 beef cattle and dairy cattle have been culled in the past 5 years, it is concerning that farmers are concerned that they are not being met, that you haven't met with them, you haven't met with the Ulster Farmers Union and the Veterinary Services on this specific issue that the request went forward for.
So I have met farmers, I have met the Ulster Farmers Union, so I don't know where that's coming from, frankly. I engage with people regularly. I'm very well known to be a listening minister and also a minister who's prepared to act. If you want that meeting, I can arrange it this week.
Mike Nesbitt.
Minister, in terms of that forestation, I know you're going to write to me in terms of the 18 million trees. But what is the ultimate objective in terms of that strategy?
Minister.
The ultimate objective here in Northern Ireland is that we've come from a place where, in terms of Western Europe, one of the least forested areas. So we need to address that. We need to address that for two reasons. One is the impact upon the environment of that situation, but also in terms of our climate change obligations. And afforestation provides us a real opportunity to be able to deliver upon our legal obligations around that. We also have a situation where we see forested areas are extremely popular, and I'm very conscious that there's a number of councils who have taken on lease agreements with the Forest Service for amenities, and what's happened in those situations is the places are packed. There's many people coming to it, so there's great opportunities around this. We see this today in terms of the amount of questions around forestation and tree planting. People are very keen to see that happen. Now, am very keen to work with people on that, and we need to be able to facilitate in cooperation with landowners. But that's the opportunity here for Northern Ireland, and I'm very confident we can achieve that, because there's real community buy-in for this. And we were in Dungnadee a few weeks ago, and the community actively sought out grant funding to be able to deliver a community orchard in the area. That's really, really positive.
Brings a conclusion to topical questions. Thank you, Mr. Nesbitt. Mr. O'Toole.
Speaker, during Justice Questions, I asked the Minister about movements at the top of the civil service, including from her department. Could you just confirm whether it's in order for a member to ask a Minister